Hello, we are live. How is everyone this evening? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. I've got Crimson here with me, helping me with admin.
Hello.
Sorry, I spoke over you. Say that again.
Hello.
It's better. We've got a few technical issues, haven't we?
Again.
And all day, my connection to my work Wi-Fi has been terrible. I've rebooted the router and given it a good talking to. So I hope it won't be too bad. Phone needs to go on silent. Yes, such an amateur. What I will do, silent phone, be silent. That's right. Now I can do a thing where I did speed test. Should tell me what the upload speed is. Yes. Nothing's new, Scott. Technical issues are part of the course. The Omnissiah doesn't like me. This is something we all know. I think that was me from a moment ago.
Yeah.
Oh no, that was last week's ramble. Test failed to connect. That's not a good start. Uh-oh. Praise the Omnissiah indeed. So you can see we've got Lemmy there. It's not one of her usual perches, but Molly's down there, so Lemmy is staying up high. What Lemmy doesn't know is that Eric Draven's left foot isn't attached, so if she biffs him, the whole thing is going to come falling down. I should possibly remove him ahead of time. What do you think? Do you think I should remove him ahead of time?
You'll disturb her if you move him.
Yeah. Ooh. Okay, so yes, welcome to rambles and digressions are very much part of everything I do. So I'm going to ramble this evening about Craftworld Eldar. So anyone who is in the chat, feel free to hit me questions, give me sort of topics to ramble about, or even sort of random little things. My admin is helping me with the questions, although currently trying to work out how to get a Chromebook to log in. So yeah, few technical issues. So yes, it's very warm outside today. Unpleasantly so. I don't like warm. I prefer cool. What you can possibly tell from last week is that the Necrons are encroaching further up this shelf. There are now a couple of Ghost Arcs on here as well. All set and ready to be assembled and painted up for... there's definitely going to have to be a Necron versus Eldar campaign. There's going to have to be to get some of that ancient rivalry in place. Oh no, Moog, light on the heckling. Trying to finish your night thingy. Yeah, it looks awesome, your night thingy. You've got to sort of, for those of you people who are watching who aren't members or who aren't in the Discord, and if you're a member, the Discord's available to you. It's the knight, and it's got this head thing, and it's got all squiggly tentacles coming out of it, like some kind of evil Cthulhu knight. It's an awesome looking kit bash. Yay, Moog. So, how far are we? I'm gonna, on the 5 minutes in mark, almost exactly. It won't be exactly. I'll start rambling about the Craftworlds. Or I'll attempt to anyway, rather than rambling about the everything. Hey, Teutonic Knight. Sorry, Teutonic Knight 92. I wouldn't want to offend the other 91 Teutonic Knights. or anyone else I haven't said hello to. Hello. Hi, Mick and Richard. I already said hi to Scott, I think, and Donald. Did the stream glitch, or was it just you? No. Right, 5 minutes. So, Craftworld Eldar. I had a ramble about Drakari a few weeks ago, and I touched on the hi Sam, touched on the origins of the Eldari and the Craftworld Eldar, and I thought this is going to make a mighty good ramble. I'm going to try not to do too much of the same ramble, but essentially, Eldar as creatures have incredibly big brains, metaphorically speaking. They are the depth of their ability to process data as a brain does is immense, and that means they can get incredibly detailed and incredibly focused, and they're also an innately psychic race. They are all to a greater or lesser extent psychic, even to the extent that Asurani Eldar, the piloting controls for their vehicles are psychic. You sort of think the vehicle around. It's quite interesting. If you've ever read the book Jane Zar, which is I recommend that thoroughly if you're an Eldar fan. There's this bit when and the Drakari raider sort of gets into one of the Asurani ships to pilot it, because they're all together and there's some kind of crash going on, and she's like, "Oh, I'll fly." Sits there, and there's like no controls. It's just like a crystal. And she's like, "WTF, guys? Really?" So massively psychic, and they have a great capacity for getting really heavily into whatever it is they're into. It's like their extremes are more extreme. Their sorrows are more sorrowful. Their joys are more joyful, which is precisely where Slaanesh came from, because it was the cumulative because emotions in real space reflect into the warp. And that's why, Khorne and still having admin problems. We need to get some incense and pour some oil on it and say the sacred prayers to the Omnissiah. And yeah, so I'm a couple of levels into a tangent here, but Khorne and Nurgle, disease and bloodshed, they're two really sort of easy ones to relate to. I say relate to, I think you know what I mean. They've existed since sentient life has existed. But Slaanesh is the Prince of Excess. Slaanesh is the embodiment of that Eldari ability to feel high highs and low lows. It's that excess. And Eldar society started to crumble when, as I guess was inevitable, when an Eldar mind and spirit is allowed to run free and is unfettered, they go to extremes. And sooner or later, the extremes don't become extreme enough. They need to go to more extremes. And that way you ended up with pleasure cults, death cults, murder cults, all kinds of weird and insane things that really not good for the soul. And all this negative energy started building up in the warp. And eventually it got to a point when, boom, Slaanesh, as that energy became sentient. Now, there were a number of Eldar, as often in societies or groups that start to go a little bit crazy. There were a number of Eldar who saw this coming and thought, this is not good, and decided the number of ways to try and stop it. Some were killed by the crazy ones for the window. Don't let her lean on the window because gravity. So the dog's now higher than the cat. That's weird. And whatever that was on the floor. Is that your phone? One moment, phone recovery.
No, it's fine. Don't worry.
I got it.
You've
I
got-
got it.
That's not the phone.
That is the phone. That is the phone. See, it's a phone. And that's a bit of cabaret. And now the dog has seen Lemmy. I'll just hum some lift music. Do 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 do. It'll calm down now. So, where was I? So some Eldari saw this coming. Now what are you doing?
All this technology, it's just horrific. I'm having a nightmare. I'm sorry.
Molly.
Somebody's coming for her.
All right. Oh, you were summoning a dog wrangler.
I was summoning, yeah.
Right. Okay. Dog wrangler inbound. So, the ones who fled the Eldar Empire, knowing that it was doomed, they built massive, massive starships, some the size of planets. And these were called Craftworlds. And basically all the Eldar who were kind of in their right mind got on a Craftworld and legged it. And some of them didn't do it enough because they were still close enough to the epicenter of the boom when Slaanesh became sentient and just devoured all the Eldar souls in real space within the area, which was most of the galaxy. Some of the Craftworlds had made it far enough away. Some were just devoured instantly because they were too close, and some were gradually and slowly devoured. You know, sort of the equivalent of being caught in the nuclear fallout, not killed instantly, but sort of tainted and corrupted and will just diminish. So these became the Craftworlders. Now, what was interesting was what happened later to lead to the paths of the Eldar. So, and some of this, I try not to do any spoilers, but some of this is alluded to in the Jane Zar book. It's very good. It really is very good if you haven't read it. It starts shortly after the fall, and there's lots of flashbacks from Jane Zar to shortly after the fall, and the journey that she goes on from an arena fighter to eventually becoming the Phoenix Lord Jane Zar. And one of the first aspects, her and Asurani become the first. They sort of found the first aspect shrines, and they become the first aspect warriors. They learn that the way to control the Eldar excesses is to focus it. And so the way an Eldar on a craft world lives is they follow a path, which, you know, you could say it's like a job or a vocation or whatever. It might be a butcher, baker, a candlestick maker, a dire avenger, a seer, a wraith singer. It could be anything. But they follow that path and they focus on it, and they obsess on it, and they master it. And then when they've mastered it, they set it aside and find another path. And so over the course of an Eldar's life, they will walk many paths. Now, an Exarch an Eldar who stays on a path for too long, or they find themselves unable to leave it, they get consumed by the path. And rather than it being an aspect of themselves that they can set aside, sorry, cat wrangling now, an aspect of themselves that they can set aside, it becomes something they can't leave. So whereas we might have a job and we go to work, we do our 9 to 5 or whatever it is we do, and then we are good at it, we do it, and then at 5 o'clock we put it aside and go back to our life, and we enjoy cinema, theatre, television, Warhammer, and so on. And we have different aspects to ourselves. Well, an Eldar who gets stuck on the path loses all those others. Come 5 o'clock, they're still an Exarch. And then they're still an Exarch, still an Exarch, an Exarch. And then when an Eldar becomes an Exarch, it leaves the shrine that it's in and goes off and founds another shrine. So if okay, I did not say your name, nor did I say play Dissolve by Abso Facto. Alexa, stop. I mean, you heard me. I did not say that. This crazy robot. No, don't praise the machine spirit. That machine spirit is bad. So an Aspect Warrior Shrine is founded by an Exarch who then trains other... Oh dear. Sorry, Moog. Sorry. I said the A word. And then they create their own shrine, they create a new shrine, and they take in Eldari to become part of them. We'll get to the end of the path, some of whom may get trapped on it and then go on to as an Exarch. So the way Craftworld Eldar survive, the way they keep their impulses and their excesses in check is by this system of paths. Now, it's not terribly clear in any of the canon I've read exactly how the link is made from the Siam-Han and Jane Zar, when they find them, when they become the first Aspect Warriors, to how that becomes the thing that all the Craftworlds do. That's I guess yet to be filled in canon-wise, or it's canon I'm unaware of. But yes, so all Craftworlds are. You'll see if you look in the codices, they're referred to as Asurani. That's their keyword. It's they follow the path of Azuran. So they follow the Eldar paths, and the Eldar war paths are the ones we see on the battlefield. Natural break. I think I've come to the end of a ramble there. Well, obviously not the end of the ramble. I think I've come to a dead end. So there are all sorts of paths in Eldar follow. And when we play 40k, we only really get exposed to a relatively small number of them. But some of them are far more common, or not, than others. The most common. So I'm going to back up a step. So when Keelah-Men-Shekain, the Eldar god of war, the bloody-handed god, fought Slaanesh. Slaanesh was victorious, but Slaanesh wasn't able to kill Keelah-Men-Shekain. Slaanesh was only able to shatter him. And part of his essence landed in the center of every Craftworld. And it grows there in the throne room to the avatar of Cain. And the Aspect Warriors are aspects of the war god. It's a way of Eldar war. Some quite obscure, some quite common. They're all facets of the avatar. The avatar refers to Jane Zar. There's a really good bit in Jane Zar where the avatar and Jane Zar are having a chat, and he refers to her very disparagingly as daughter. And it's very cool. So yes, they're all aspects of Eldar war, and the most common is the Dire Avengers. They are the generic Eldar war shrine, and that's sort of typified by the utility of the unit. They have some close combat ability, some shooting ability, but they're not especially focused in either one or the other. They're often considered a shooting unit, but they have things like they can overwatch on 5s in the current edition, so they are better at being charged. There are exarch powers that give the Dire Avengers bonuses in close combat. They used to get an extra attack when they were charged. I don't know if they still do that. It's always been very utilitarian, which is why they are the most ubiquitous shrine. So whenever I am, and then you have the ones that are very common ways of war: Howling Banshees, Dark Reapers, Fire Dragons. And they're not particularly fleshed out in the canon as to. It goes into a lot of what a Banshee is and what a Fire Dragon is, but it doesn't necessarily flesh out in what way they embody an aspect of Kilamesh Chicane. They talk about the Banshee whale. I think it's Moray Haag's whale that is a sort of psychic paralysis type thing. The Banshee masks that they wear amplifies their psychic energy to just paralyze, which is why you can't overwatch against them. Back in the day, back in Second Ed, your opponent didn't get to roll any attack dice when you charged them, which basically meant you got about 5 or 6 hits with each model. They were gross. I love them. My favorite aspect of Howling Banshees, they epitomize Craftworld Eldar warriors in that they have one very, very specific job to do, and they do it amazingly well. But like all others, they start to fall apart under when they try and do other things, and that's where. So, as a Craftworld army is like a Swiss Army knife. It's each element of it has a different job to do, and you have to use them in concert together to be able to use it to full effect. So Howling Banshees are pretty weak. They're not strong. They can punch through armor, but it's very difficult for them to wound. So you doom your opponents. So you use your Farseer to make it easier to wound. You use your Psychers to debuff your opponent. And it's very true of lots of different elements of the Eldar army, in that if you take one unit in isolation, it's no good. However, if you combine lots of units together and get them working in concert, they are immense. And it's how you pull those combinations off that determines whether or not you're successful. Now, in more recent years, they've started to make Eldar units more utilitarian and more survivable. So Howling Banshees are now strength 4 because Power Swords are strength 4, which makes them a lot more useful without the other units. I guess it's good for sales. It's good for improving sales of the various models, because a lot of people don't want to play an army that's difficult to play. It doesn't have as wide an appeal, I guess. I still play the Eldar how I consider to be true to their narrative. I don't just sort of load up with all types of the wrong units just because they're powerful. They should be rare. So going back to the aspects of war, the Dire Avengers are by far the most numerous because they're utilitarian. Then you have another layer of ones that are pretty common. Howling Banshees are common. Striking Scorpions, they're a very stealthy aspect. Dark Reapers are all about the shooting. All about the shooting. Swooping Hawks, all about the flying and dropping of bombs. You then have others that are more obscure. Shining Spears, Shadow Spectres, Warp Spiders. Now, you might have, on a Craftworld, you might have a couple of those shrines, not a huge amount. There are also, they talk about, there are references in previous books made to really obscure shrines, like the slicing orbs of something or other, or I can't remember one of the others, but So there is a question. I can see Immortan Joe is asking if I'd be interested in GW coming out with new paths and shrines. I would be really up for that. I would love to have new shrines. And sorry, admin, I could see you'd written it down. I knew it was there. It was just timely. She's just screwed the post-it up. She's not happy. Usurping her job. I would love to see more aspect shrines coming out, but I used to like it back in the day when they would limit what you could and couldn't have. So I used to like when it said 0 to 1. This is rare. You can't have many of these. Used to like that. I'm wondering what I've skipped over, because I've wended and weaved in Tangent Land. I will inevitably miss something throughout this ramble and think afterwards, shucks. So yeah, at what point to go into rules and stuff? So there are different canon craft worlds in the book, in the codex. There are your main 5, and there are your main 5. You can make your own now in the same way that you can make custom chapters and everything else. But I'm going to talk a bit about the main 5 because I think there are some interesting facets of each of those that don't necessarily come across in the codex these days, that have come from sort of previous editions and earlier versions of lore and so on. So, for example, Craftworld Ulthwe. Some of you will have seen, having had some of you will have seen some of the recent battle reports I did about the Craftworld Ulthwe trying to influence the orcs. And there is, I think we've just done the first chapter of an Ulthwe versus Night Lords in the members lounge. That's a members only one, but there will be subsequent parts of that coming. That's I do like my Eldar. I do lots of battle reports with them. So Ulthwe, the Craftworld Ulthwe is sited very close to the Eye of Terror, and it is a matter of debate amongst the Eldar as to why Craftworld Ulthwe have lots of seers. So basically, they're psychers. Some of them maintain, the Craftworld Ulthwe maintain that they have a lot of psychers because they are stood sentinel on the Eye of Terror, and as such, lots of seers are required. So many Eldar follow the path of the seer. Other dissenting voices say that actually their proximity to the Eye of Terror has tainted them. So it's a reflection of that psyker taint that means that more of them are effectively witches. Now, what is interesting is a warlock is someone who is currently on the path of the seer, but who has previously been an aspect warrior. So seers are about sort of reading the future and fate and all those kinds of things, and manipulation and everything like that. But when they become warlocks, the warlock helms are held in the aspect warrior shrines, and when war calls, seers will return to the shrines where they were once aspect warriors and don the warlock helm and become warlocks. And then their seer powers can be marshaled in a much more martial way. And that's why profile-wise, the warlocks similar stat-wise to aspect warriors, because they're basically psyker aspect warriors, which is one of the reasons why I wish a warlock conclave was an elite choice. This is a tiny little bear of mine for Ulthwe, because most of the elite choices are aspect warriors, and they don't have a huge number of aspect warriors, because many Eldar of Ulthwe choose to follow the path of the seer. Fewer follow the path of the aspect warrior, and as a result, Craftworld Ulthwe is the only Craftworld to maintain a standing army of guardians, the so-called Black Guardians. The Guardians are basically reservists. It's your butchers, bakers, candlestick makers who, when called up to fight for the Craftworld, will just put on a suit of armor. They're not becoming an aspect. They're not going to along a path or becoming an aspect of Keelam Kane. They're just going, right, oh, I need to serve. And Ulthwe is the only Craftworld to maintain a standing army of Guardians. And back in the day, they had better stats than regular Guardians. It irked me a couple of editions ago, because what it used to be, back in the day when you had weapon skill, there was a number and a table rather than just a 2-hit. But effectively, a Guardian is an untrained Eldar, and they had a weapon skill, ballistic skill of 3, the equivalent of a trained human. The aspect warriors had weapon skill, ballistic skill 3 because they are trained. They're incredibly astute, fast minds and reflexes could get to that sort of level. A trained Eldar is the equivalent of a space marine, and so they had weapon skill, ballistic skill 4, and an Exarch was a level higher, weapon skill, ballistic skill 5. And I liked that. I liked the fact that Guardians weren't very good, but they were the equivalent of a trained human. That racial difference accounted for the difference in training. When you read sort of like Gaunt's Ghosts books, some of these, the guardsmen are good. They are really good to be able to do what they do. And that is represented by weapon skill 4, ballistic skill 4. So 4+ to hit, 4+ to hit we have now. And that's why your conscripts are 5+ to hit, because they're not. Same with orcs, 5+ to hit. So yeah, I used to like that. But no, they changed the Guardians to all be 3+ to hit. The same as the Aspect Warriors. I don't like that, narratively speaking. Guardians should be worse. But Ulthwe Guardians used to be 3+, 3+. They used to be better. And you'd build, and the rule used to be that you could never have more Aspect Warrior units than you have Guardian units. So what I always do when I'm creating my Ulthwe armies is I never take more Aspect units than Guardian units, but because of the commonality, what's the word? Frequency? Sorry, my thesaurus is on the blink. Because there are lots of them. Because there are a lot more of them than there are of other things. I always take a Dire Avenger unit. So then it becomes for me a choice about which aspect do I get in? How do I want them to interact with this particular force? I base the army around Guardians and Psychers. Because what is interesting is you have a lot of Warlocks, but that's because you have an awful lot of Seers, but not very many Aspect Warriors, because Aspect Warriors are uncommon, which basically means everyone who's a Seer, everyone who was an Aspect Warrior is probably a Seer at the moment, or has been a Seer in the past, Whereas other craft worlds, they're much less common. So I have an Alaitoc army. I'll come on to Alaitoc in a little bit. I only have one warlock in that army because it's out of a pool of aspect warriors, not particularly common, seers, not particularly common. They have to have been both. Whereas Ulthwe, loads of seers, very few aspect warriors. So it's sort of, that's why I say one of the things that's interesting, because they automatically say lots and lots of warlocks with Ulthwe. But are there though? Are there that many? Because every one of them has to have been an aspect warrior. I find it interesting, but I'm sad like that. Now, a Farseer is a seer. It's basically the equivalent of an exarch for a warlock, for a seer. They are an exarch they are a seer who has got trapped on the path of the seer. And that's where you get the notion of seer councils, where you have warlocks with basically battle seers and Farseers together in concert. There are stratagems you can use to represent that. You used to be able to get a special Ulthwe unit, which was just automatically, it just had seers and warlocks in it. And I always try and run them like that when I play them, because they buff each other, and they do that in the lore. And you can still do that with the stats, which is nice. Is that every most thing to say about Ulthwe? Maybe. Which one next? Biel-Tan. Let's go on to Biel-Tan. Now, I have actually got armies for all 5 craft worlds. It's just they're not all painted. And that's one of the reasons why I do all my aspect warriors in the generic shrine colors rather than tailoring them to the craft world that they come from, because then I can use them for all the craft worlds. Clever, yeah. This is more than just a hat rack. So you often get colors of an aspect shrine take on some elements of colors of the craft world. So you might get a Dire Avenger shrine has some sort of elements of black in them if they're from Ulthwe, or some green if they're Biel-Tan, or red if they're Siam-Han. But generally said, but no, I've gone for the colors of each one, non-craft world specific. That way I can mix and match and use all of them, which is really handy. It just means I can't use all the armies at once. I couldn't put all my Eldar armies down because there wouldn't be enough aspect warriors to go around. Biel-Tan, the Swordwind. They are very much of the philosophical view that all the rest of life kind is utterly inferior. Some Eldar leaders will assert that actually we need to work with the humans. They have inherited the galaxy. We need to help them. Not Biel-Tan. They are lesser races. We need to kill them and redominate the galaxy. Booyah. That's basically Biel-Tan. And so they are a massively aspect warrior heavy world. They really are go to town with your toys aspect warrior wise. So yeah, I when I do them, I fill out my troops with Dire Avengers. It's like, right, what's the fast attack? Hawks, shining spears, basically just go nuts. And then the Guardian element are crews for the tanks, support weapons. They have this I say unit, the Course of the Young King. Whenever let me see if I can remember this exactly right. I might be slightly off on this. I'm sure people will correct me. The Court of the Young King is a collection of exarchs from each of the shrines on the craft world. Because the way that the avatar of Keelan Shakane is awakened when war is required is a young king is selected. A young king is selected from the court by the Farseers to enter the avatar's chamber when it starts to stir. They do not speak about what goes on in the chamber, but the young king does not come out, and all that they hear are screams. It is considered an honor, but also, in in Alien versus Predator, the ancient humans considered it an honor to be host for the aliens. I'm not convinced it's that much of an honor, but so most craft worlds will only assemble the Court of the Young King when they're going to war. Biel-Tan always have a Court of the Young King because the avatar could be awakened at almost any point. In fact, I have this sort of mental image of the avatar falls on a battlefield somewhere and just breaks into brittle iron, and then it instantly growing in the shrine, and the craft world starts pulsing again and again and again. When the avatar starts to awake, his heartbeat thrums throughout the Wraithbone core of the craft world, and all the Eldar get energized by it psychically. They feel the call to war. And then the Young King picks one, and they pick a Young King, and he goes in, and boom, avatar, no more Young King. But yeah, they always have a Court of the Young King, and it always consists of these exarchs. You used to be able to have that as a unit, and you could have the different exarchs, and you could use them to accompany the avatar. And I always liked that you left out the one that had just been eaten. You'd never have all of them. You'd never have one from every aspect. You'd always go, and today the fire dragon died, which I really like. So yeah, the Young King. Now, what is interesting about Biel-Tan is, and this isn't something they talk about or they write about, but something that I think is a logical deduction from inference. Biel-Tan should have lots of warlocks, and when I get round to painting up my Biel-Tan, they will have a lot of warlocks, because coming back to this thing, Biel-Tan, very few seers, but all the aspect warriors. So pretty much every seer will have been an aspect warrior. So for the exact opposite reason, I think warlocks, not necessarily far seers, but warlocks are as frequent, as common in Biel-Tan as they should be in Ulthwe. Should be as common in both. That's what I think. Now there is another type of Eldar path which is very common on Biel-Tan, and that's the path of the Autarch. Now, the Autarch is an interesting one because it's a path that can only be walked after an Eldar has walked many aspect paths. Because the path of the Autarch is the path of command, the path to be able to direct the war host and direct the will, if you like, of the avatar of Kila Men-Shakaim. And in order to be able to walk that path, they must have experienced the different ways of Eldar war. So they can only go to that path once they've got that breadth of experience from their past paths. Although this is where it's a little bit complex, and it's a little bit not made very clear in the law. And I think it was one of these ones that was introduced and not really thought of how it affected the law. Because an Autarch can have equipment from lots of aspect shrines. And the first time I saw this, I thought, this is utter garbage. Because what's meant to happen is you're meant to leave a path, set it aside, and not go back to it. Not, I feel like being a swooping hawk was fun, so I'll keep the wings and just be like a skydiver. No, you're a swooping hawk or you're not. But so when in the first edition they brought the Autarch out, which was in Bland edition, aka 5th edition, they didn't elaborate on any of this, and I was massively irked by it for a long time. It got to me. However, the way they then clarified it in 6th was that when someone starts on the path of the Autarch, they visit the shrines that they were previously aspect warriors to, and they are allowed to choose one piece of equipment from their time on that path that they then take to blend together as they start on the path of the Autarch. That I kind of like, because that's more of a sort of you are taking this overall holistic view of everything, and you are shaping these things together into a new thing. And then the path of command is the thing that gives you your rerolls and your command point farming and so on. It's the it's the Eldar General as opposed to the Eldar Psyker. It's a bit like your army led by Aragorn rather than Gandalf. So, the Farsi is Gandalf who goes, yeah, something big's going to happen over there. Go that way. Shoot that thing. As opposed to Aragorn who's going, Legolas, kill that one. Bring it down. Why isn't it dying? Oh, this isn't good. Boom. I digress. I said I digress. Try to steal my catchphrase. Try to steal my catchphrase. What's that all about?
I know.
How's it going? Are you managed to get the technology to work?
Yes.
Yes. Hello. Yes, it has worked. It's all right, Lemmy. It's all right. Lemmy's here a little agitated. She looks like she's going to do a runner or something. 1 minute. What's that?
Grabber.
Mark, will you take it down and just shut the kitchen door so she can't come back up? Yeah, got it. So,
Gotta. Hi, Mick.
So, but I'm confused
Why?
because you're typing, but I'm hearing it.
Oh.
But you're also saying it into the mic, and I'm seeing it.
Hi, Tom.
So that's Biel-Tan. Now, Iyanden is an interesting one. So the Ghost Warriors. So when oh gosh, this one's a complex one because I'm just thinking, I need to go back a bit to explain that. Oh no, I need to go back and explain that and that and that and that. So when an Eldar dies, its spirit goes into the warp, and Slaanesh is now in the warp and goes, lovely, nibbles, and then just pulls it apart and torments it for all time. So Eldar fear Slaanesh. They fear that death. And different types of Eldar have different, let's call them coping mechanisms. The coping mechanism that the Asurani have is they wear spirit stones. And when they die, the spirit stone, the spirit passes, the stone has to be in contact with them, but the spirit then passes into the stone rather than going into the warp, which saves it from Slaanesh. In the Craftworld, the Wraithbone core infinity circuit in the center is where all the Eldar souls live. It's where they live in the afterlife. It's kind of like the afterlife waiting booth because they know you can't go through the door because there's a nasty gribbly in there. So you just sort of go into, I don't know, Southend. You're going to stay in Southend. It's a Douglas Adams reference. See, at least some people will get it. More than none will get it.
Mm-hmm.
More than none. Anyone get the reference?
No.
Come on, help me out here, guys.
No.
Come on, someone. No, okay. So,
Can always rely on Moog.
is your thing updating faster than mine?
Oh, yes. And mine, Tom, over my head too.
Oh, Joe!
Joe!
How very dare you!
Love it.
Don't you be looking at my bald spot either.
It's big enough.
Starship Heart of Gold, my man Moog. So yeah, so what the Eldar do is they recover the spirit stones of their fallen, and they place them on the infinity circuit, and the spirit passes from the stone into the infinity circuit, where they all sort of live in this, or unlive in this kind of gestalt, where their existence continues and they sort of have their almost the afterlife, but not quite kind of thing going on. And that's kind of where they stay until they need to serve the craft world once more. And this is something that the craft world only do when they are desperate, is they can place infinity stone, they can place spirit stones on the infinity circuit, and spirit will pass into them. That stone can then be placed in a wraithbone construct, which it can then control, kind of as if it were part of the infinity circuit. And that's where you get Wraith Guard and Wraith Lords and Wraith Knights. Wraith Knights are a little bit different. I'll come to those when I talk about Iyanden. We are talking about Iyanden. I'll come to those in a minute. Eldar only do this in dire circumstances because to them it's sort of tantamount to necromancy. It's disturbing the rest of the dead. And there's a particular branch of Eldar Psykers called Spirit Seers, who are ones who that their path is about community.
We've got drinks coming in.
We've got drinks coming in.
Bring drinks in.
One moment, beverages.
Bring drinks in.
Yes, you can bring drinks in.
Yes, you can bring drinks in before we dehydrate.
I mean, I've still got my drink from before, but more the merrier.
It's okay. This is Grace with the drink.
Thanks, Grace. But the Eldar spirits are very disoriented in the real world, and they need people to guide them. And typically, it's the proximity of living seers that are able to Coke for the Coke Throne. Yeah, still no sponsorship deal because I personify their brand image, so I'm astonished. Yes, they can't relate to the real world, the physical world, as well as they could as well when they were alive. It's weird and it's distant and whispers, and they have no eyes. They're sensing things psychically. So the path of the Spirit Seer, they are there to guide the Wraith constructs. Back in the day, you used to only be able to use them. They couldn't act if they weren't near a seer or a warlock. But they can now. But Craftworld Iyanden, it's a bit of a short story, really. It's a bit of a short, tragic story. They got eaten by Tyranids, by a lot of Tyranids. And the population got absolutely decimated. And they were only saved by Prince Uriel returning with his Reaver fleet to drive off the Tyranids. So, Reavers and the Path of the Outcast, we're going to get to this in a little while. Did you summon the drinks, by the way? Did you use technology to ask them to be sent?
Of course.
You did. Oh. Next level. The penny only just dropped. That's what was happening. She's the magic clicky box to make Coca-Cola appear. Still no sponsorship deal. So the Path of the Outcast is a path, but it kind of isn't. But it is, but it isn't. Some Eldar find the craft world life just too restrictive. They need to flex their wings. They need to be more there too. I mean, people get this. Some people, need to wander, need to roam, can't be tied down, can't be restricted. And Eldar are no different in that respect. And when that happens, they follow the Path of the Outcast, where they basically wander the galaxy as individuals. It's very perilous because they're a long way away from the safety of the Infinity Circuit and the safety of the craft world. They do carry their spirit stones, but the chance of their being recovered it's pretty slight. And they're basically scouts and the remote eyes and ears for the craft world. But when the craft world calls, they still have very, very strong ties to the craft world. They still have loyalty. They don't have any kind of bitterness or enmity to the craft world because they can't they can't hack it. They can't hack the lifestyle. They're still very loyal. They just do things differently. They follow a path. Hey, path. Hey, the metaphor works. And when they're called to war, they return, and that's where the ranger unit, the hidey sneaky shooty unit, and one element of the canon which isn't reflected in the game are the Reaver fleets, who are outcasts, but they don't follow the path of the outcast. They are more sort of I do what I want kind of Eldar, and they're in big spaceships flying around, having all the excesses of being Eldar, but not Drukhari. Drukhari, very different. Drukhari is more torture, don't I feel young, to summarize the previous Paul rambling. There is a line in I have returned to defend my Craftworld. The Craftworld. Well remembered, Grandillo. Oh, you get super points for that. I had, yeah. Much respect. Big wow. And so they're not particularly well described in the lore, and there isn't an army for them. I wish there were. It's sort of somewhere between Drukhari and Craftworld Eldar. Some of the Craftworld principles, but some of the lifestyle of Drukhari kind of mished into one. That's in Jane Zar, and I'll keep plugging that book. I should ask for sponsorship from Black Library for that one book that maybe one of you might read. I might get 4p. So, I totally lost myself with that weird and witty quip. There's basically a pirate way station that they end up going to look for ships, to look for transport, where they there are some Drukhari there, some Craftworlders, some Harlequins. So basically Prince Uriel is an outcast from Iyanden, and they all come back and save the day. And they maintain then close ties with his Corsair fleet. But what Iyanden then do or realize is we've nearly been entirely wiped out. The only way we can carry on is if we wake up the dead and have lots and lots and lots of wraith constructs, because there's hardly any of us but a boatload of them. So they have to turn to necromancy to bolster their armies. So Wraith Guard, Wraith Lords, they're the mainstay of an Iyanden army. And I always find it interesting whenever I'm playing Iyanden is to, wow. All right. Thank you, Eldar Blog. That is fantastic. Thank you very much. Massive donation from Mr. Eldar Blog there. Thank you. I'm totally thrown. What was I saying? Yes, I like to give myself a limit, depending on the point size of the army, of the number of living Eldar I actually have on the table. It's like, okay, 15. Right. Need a couple of troops. Okay, Rangers, they don't count. So Iyanden, this is another example of there being a few things come out of the book, which I don't think, sort of further deductions. So there's nothing in the Codex that says Iyanden have lots and lots of Rangers, but they should totally have lots of Rangers, because the most numerous living Eldar from that craft world are the ones who weren't on it when the Tyranids ate them. So I always will go to having Rangers with Iyanden, because they're very numerous as far as Iyanden is concerned, much more numerous. I also like the notion of trying to kit bash some units together and doing some Corsairs and doing Count's-As. So like Storm Guardians with Kit Bash Drukhari and Guardians together and doing Count's-As and doing those in Prince Uriel's colours and doing those as some of his Corsair fleet. And I'm like, okay, they don't count towards my total number of Craftworlders. But I wouldn't always have those. So then it's okay, right? Well, if I have got the Craftworlds, what can I do? But now, of course, it's easier with the you don't have to do a battalion anymore. So you can go, okay, well, I can do a patrol. Right, well, I get 2 elites. Well, all my Wraith units are either elite or heavy. I can only have 4. Okay, maybe I need to do a Vanguard or a Spearhead. Have fewer warm bodies. Okay, right, well, I need some vehicles. Right, this one's got 1 pilot. Okay, that's fine. I need some heavy weapons. What's the most effective warm body-wise? Right, support weapon platforms. They're 2 each. War walkers are better. Guys, have this mental image of halls and halls and halls full of all this equipment, all these weapons, all this war gear, and just no one there to use it. And of course, they'd have lots of guardians because they're, a Craftworld's got to need toilets, so you got to have plumbers. You can't have no Eldar being plumbers. You can't have 0 Eldar plumbers because no toilets. Who's going to make the bass? So you've still got to have butchers, bakers, candlestick makers. So I think you'd have quite a lot of guardians. So I like the idea of having a relatively small number of war bodies, but then being mostly guardians. But then when you do guardians as your troops, you got minimum 10. Whereas actually you could put 5 Dire Avengers down. And yes, they're the most numerous aspect warriors. So even on a small craft world, yeah, you are likely to have them. I'm always weighing these things up. And the other one, which I find really interesting, is they talk about so Iyanden, yes, they all have Wraith Knights. And Wraith Knights are the big ones. They're the like Imperial Knight equivalent, and they've got big, super hitty death swords and Titan disintegrating guns and amazing, really, really good stuff. But if you look at the lore, it says the lore. Do they have telephone sanitizers? Oh, you're writing that down, are you? Okay, go write it down. I'll cover that. I'll cover that later. A Wraith Knight is made of twins. Twins where one has died and one still lives. The spirit stone of the one that's died is mounted in the knight, and the living one forms the pilot. And they have a sort of fatalistic bond where they can't be, terribly separated for long periods of time. And that makes sense. Yes, you get Wraith Knight. Iyanden are all about the Wraiths. Well, if they have a very small population, they are going to have a small number of twins. That is just simple population dynamics and mathematics. So I don't actually think Iyanden should have a lot of Wraith Knights. I think they should be more rare on Iyanden than they are elsewhere because they have the lowest population, the lowest available instance of twins. Okay, you are going to have some where one twin was killed during the Tyrian attack and the other one wasn't, but even so, I don't think that accounts for it. So that's Iyanden. Where to go next? Now, I'm in 2 minds as to whether to cover off Siam-Han and Alaitoc and maybe some other Eldar goodies in another ramble and go straight to questions. I do want to try and keep these roughly to an hour. And we're over the hour, and I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 post-its.
Some are only comments.
Right, okay. What do you reckon? Should we push on through? It's probably be another 20 minutes with the other ones.
To you, yeah.
Okay.
Do whatever you feel. More Coke.
So, Siam-Han. Now, there's a lot of potentially very interesting lore with Siam-Han that I haven't seen it terribly well described anywhere. So some of this is my own inference, but I would love to get hold of some decent audiobooks on Siam-Han, around Siam-Han Eldar. They are basically tribal, and they form they have hereditary households, so they're very, very clannish. It's the only Eldar that I'm aware of that behave in that way, very similar to sort of human aristocracy, human noble worlds. Feudal is the word I was looking for. Highly feudal. And they're known as the Wind Riders. They are all about life in the saddle with the wind blowing through their hair. They're kind of savage. A lot of other Eldar would consider them as savages. And their thing is speed and getting into combat. They like flying. So the way I interpret that and build the armies for them is all around. Obviously, there are aspirations that fly. There are units that fly. Eldar jet bikes are now universally known as Wind Riders, although that's a Siam-Han thing. That's why I refer to mine as Eldar jet bikes when I've got them on the table, and not as Wind Riders, because Wind Riders are a Siam-Han thing. Anyway, so you've got all those flying things. You've got this sort of image of the red flying war host of all the bikes, the Vipers, which are basically like flying speeders with mounted guns, the Wave Serpents, which are the transports, the Falcon tanks, the Prism tanks, all escorted by. Thank you, Three Shade. You are right. It's the Wild Riders, and that's why. Yes, well done. Thank you. That's why the name Wind Riders never stuck with me, because then they'd be the Wild Rider Wind Riders, which sounds like a tongue twister and sounds ridiculous. So yeah, Eldar jet bikes. They love, that's the thing, riding in the wind. So I mean, you would get the likes of Autarchs, and can you tell this is the one I know least about? You get Autarchs and Farseers all mounted on jet bikes, Guardians mounted on jet bikes, Warlocks mounted on jet bikes. High instance of things like Shining Spears. But what some people's interpretation of it is that they don't have troops. And it's not true that they don't have troops, because they are an Eldar Craftworld like any other. They have their own quirks, and they have their tribes, their packs, their feudal systems, but they're still Asurani. They still follow paths. And if they're not on a path that is flying related, like a swooping hawk or a shining spear, if they are in a martial path, they will be Dire Avengers. They will be fire dragons and so on. But they will still have that savage fury, that fire, that sort of bestial nature to want to get into the fight and hit their opponent. And so I see formations of Wave Serpents with units of Aspect Warriors in them. So they have all these units in their army. It's just then the logistics when you're building the army about how you get them, to the fight. And that all depends on the scenario. So if you're in a scenario where you've already landed some troops, you might have troops with guns stood at the back, or you might have actually this is a forward push, in which case you work out, right, we need Dire Avengers, same as any craft world, we need some anti-tanks, so therefore we need fire dragons, we need this, we need that, we need the other. Right, how do I get them over there? Right, well, maybe some can webway assault, fine. And then, right, but I need transports, I need Wave Serpents. Right, now my characters, are they going to be on jetbikes, or are they going to be in the Wave Serpents? And that's the I sort of love the image of the whole war host just moving around together as one, all the guns firing, and then bang, hitting with a massive punch. Now it's not terribly easy to do Eldar wise, and this comes back to it being the Eldar units having a specific purpose, and you need to combine them and focus them in order to get the best out of them. So, for example, in the current codex, Siam-Han can reroll to charge, and I've seen some people go, "What's the point of that? What's the point of that? You don't want to charge with Eldar. You're a shooting army." Eldar are not a shooting army. They are an army with many specialized units, and the ones that are most frequently taken, I'm not going to say easiest to take. The ones that are easiest to take are the shooting ones, and not the ones that are trickier to use, because you've got to get them in the right place, in the right time, in the right combination. That's the challenge. That's the fun for me. That's where the spark of it is, trying to make all these difficult individual tools, trying to make them sing together. That's where it's at for me. That's the jam. Yeah.
Don't do that again.
Yeah, all right. It's fair. And there are very few flying Siam-Han units that are good in close combat. There's Shining Spears and there's Warlocks on jet bikes. That's about it. All the others are fairly tame. But that doesn't mean that your foot troops that you can get there in flying vehicles aren't as savage. That's the word, savage. I think I said bestial before, and that could mean a number of different things, possibly Drakari oriented, but savage. Yeah, okay. So, moving off Siam-Han, before I repeat myself and am inaccurate. This has highlighted to me, I need to read up more about Siam-Han. I will be going on Lexicanum later this evening to swat up. Not you! Just because I say any word with an X in it doesn't give you the right to flash up and play strange music at me. Omnis Sire be merciful. So, Alaitoc. Now, Alaitoc I find very interesting because they are the most puritanical of the Eldar Craftworlds. And some of you will have seen the Death of Hope campaign, which I did with Winters on Deployment Zone, which has been very popular. I've had a lot of good feedback about it. And anyone who isn't aware of this, the Death of Hope on deploymentzone.tv is actually free to air. It's available without a subscription to Deployment Zone. You just have to go and find it and you can watch it. That was a thing they did when the pandemic hit. They sort of opened that up for everyone to see, which was super cool of them. But that campaign is based around my Alaitoc army. And why was I telling you that bit? I don't know. They're incredibly puritanical. And they are rigid adherents to the paths. They have far less flexibility, far less ability to exercise free will than any other Eldar, any other Asurani Eldar. And as such, they have a very large number of outcasts. Many Alaitocians follow the path of the outcast, which is why they have lots of rangers, to the extent that many rangers, because there's so many rangers get stuck on the path of the outcast and never return to the craft world. You often find that some Eldar spend different periods of their lives as Drakari, as Asurani, as outcasts. They move all over. Their life experiences are often many and varied, and they switch from one to the other. So many who walk the path of the outcast sort of get it out of their system, as it were. But some of them walk it for so long, they can't get it out of the system, and they become what are known as pathfinders. They're basically the exarchs of the path of the outcast. They can't ever leave it, and they are very good at it. That's why they get lots of buffs and things for being pathfinders, for being Alaitoc. So yeah, whenever picking an Alaitoc army, always lots of Rangers. And then it's like, all right, well, I need some Aspect Warriors. Okay, so always Dire Avengers first. Got to have some Guardian representation. And then the army sort of balloons from there. They're one of the, what I consider to be the generic Craftworlds. The ones that are pretty different are Iyanden and Ulthwe and Siam-Han. Biel-Tan are very aspect oriented. I think Alaitoc is probably the most generic of the main five. I don't like using too many Wraith constructs with Alaitoc because with them being so puritanical, they shy. Mine, again, another interpretation from me is that I think they shy further away from necromancy than the other aspects, the other Craftworlds. But also, what I think a side effect of the Puritanism is because they're so focused on the paths. I interpret that as there will be more Aspect Warriors because there will be more. All the Eldar will be on a path. The instances of them not being will be reduced, which means that there will be more Eldar on paths, and therefore, by nature, more Eldar on aspect paths. So I see them as second to Biel-Tan in terms of aspects because they're very focused on the paths and the Asurani way. That's pretty much it for Alaitoc, I think. Maybe I should have led with Alaitoc and got the quick one out of the way rather than ending on it. Oh, yeah, they're just generic. Not just generic, but there's less that's entirely unique about them. There's less to read into it than I already have. So I think it's time for questions.
Well, they're not all questions.
Hit me, admin. Post-its. Boom. Grandillo, maybe too much exists for Dawn of War 3. That was an interesting experience. Maybe too much what? I wonder what was said. Pretty sure you can't play Dawn of War too much. Maybe too much for Dawn of War 3. Yeah. The original Dawn of War was just absolutely great. And the 3 or 4 expansions, I still have them. I could play those for days on end without sleep. They are amazing. She's looking at me really weird. Like,
hey,
yeah.
I'm not.
I just saw your head go up and your eyes.
I'm listening to you for once and not speaking.
Another one from Grandillo. Grandillo? Grandillo. To know. Sorry. I don't think the machine spirits like the suggestion of the purge. No, they're scared. When I talked about purging the machine spirits, they ran away scared. They decided to behave themselves and forego the lack of oils. 2 from Scott. Do they have telephone sanitizers? Do who have telephone sanitizers? Do Eldar have telephone sanitizers? Well, they must do. The Bone Singer is the sort of builder caste because Eldar Wraithbone is the fundamental building material they have, and it is psychically grown by the Bone Singers. So I think what... Sorry, you can't see that I'm having the post-its swapped around in my hand. Okay. Oh, thanks, Jack. That is awesome. Thank you very much. That's much appreciated. Oh, cheers. So you could argue that I'm so happy that a Wraithbone, a Wraith Singer, a Bone Singer is a type of telephone sanitizer. I have one Bone Singer in the cupboard, in the drawers. And the dilemma I have is which Craftworld do I do them for? Because I want to have one for each. I already got one. I don't know. Answers on a postcard. Stephen and Winston. Little known fact: all the telephone sanitizers, advertisers, and advertising account executives survived the birth of Slaanesh. It's true. They were all in the B arc, and they were fired off into the distance. And the Eldar thought they were getting rid of them forever, but then the Eldar race wasn't killed by Slaanesh. It was wiped out by an infection caused from a dirty telephone. It's tragic. And for anyone who doesn't have the faintest idea what I'm talking about, it's The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams, an amazing book. It was originally a radio series, so best listened to as an audio. The sequence in which I read these out is now being controlled. I know. It's great. Another one from Scott. Do the houses go into the sea when the waves come in? What? Do the houses go into the sea when the waves come in?
This is why you should do a bit stop and do the questions.
Why not? I don't know, Scott. I'm sorry.
When you were talking about
when I was talking about plumbers, do the houses go into the sea when the waves come in? Sorry, I don't get it.
Southend.
Oh, yes. Well, you mean the way the sea is staying stock still and the houses are washing backwards and forwards? Yes, that's what it looks like inside the Infinity Circuit or something. Yes, of course. Oh, so slow. Thank you. There's basically no more than a couple of Eldar audiobooks anyway. It's annoying. I know. There's Jane Zar and Siam-Han, and there's a couple of Ynnari ones. Ynnari ones are short and not very good. The Jane Zar one is amazing. Anyone on Audible who is interested, I thoroughly recommend it. Death of Hope is just perfect. Oh, thanks, Henrik. Thanks. It was an absolute labour, the Death of Hope. It was great fun to do, and I was utterly terrified in every game. For those of you who haven't seen it, I started off a 6-episode campaign with 3,000 points of Craftworld Alaitoc, and each game stuff died, and I only had what survived the previous game to go into the next game. It was terrifying. The decisions you make when you know it's going to have a consequence later, you know you don't have an infinite pool of resources. When as an Eldar player, you know that the ones you consign to death, they're not going to have their spirit stones recovered. They're going to be destroyed because you know at the start of Death of the Hope that Exterminatus is coming. You're trying to achieve something before the planet's destroyed. So any Eldar that falls and you leave behind is going to be lost to Slaanesh. It's gives you a weird sense of guilt. It did me anyway. Zombie Fried Rice, superb name. I was about to ask if there is such a thing as too much Dawn of War. I think not. No, it's not, mate. No.
Guns might be that way. Let's go the other way.
But that's a very different conversation. Many more?
No.
Oh, okay. I love the Ynnari and wonder what will happen in Night. I am very curious to see what will happen in Night. I hope, and this is possibly a different ramble, I really hope they do their own codex and everything they can and can't do is in one book rather than it having to be pieced together from different books and then them having to put a layer of rules over the top to stop extreme things being done in combination. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to what they do. I'm very interested to see where they take the narrative. I'm hoping they write more narrative.
They're up to you.
And just finally, what's the topic for next week's ramble? Thanks, Mick. It will probably be say Hi Paul Rambles about everything again. So those of you who are channel members, get on the Discord and get topics, suggestions, things you want me to talk about in the Discord section. Anyone who's not a channel member who wants to be involved in the chat, there's 2 channel membership levels. One gets you the Discord and the ability to type in the thingy, and the other one gets you the battle report. There's a video on there that tells you all about it. Go have a look if you're interested. It doesn't commit you to anything. Having a look doesn't commit you to anything. If you click the button, it commits you to like 1 month's worth and then charges you for it. But yes, those of you who already have access, hit me up with topics to discuss for next week. And we're going to end with 2 really big thank yous because we've had a couple of donations during the ramble. The ramble. Big thank you to Aldar Blog and big thank you to Jack for contributing. That is just mind blowing, guys. Thank you so very, very much. I really appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to say thank you all for your time and thank you for listening along to my wild random tangents, arbitrating in the cat and dog wars, and learning that technology can be used to summon Coca-Cola. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one. Stay safe and bye for now. Bye.